Let's start with first question here. Son is getting intervention, but he's being pulled out of class for it. They're doing persuasive writing. He misses out on that. Is this the normal way intervention is done? Yes, this is a really common way that intervention is done in schools, like a class pull-out model. Unfortunately, it's often necessary, especially if you have a private provider coming in to do the service. They've got to come during business hours, and most of that is just during class time. So that's often how it goes, unless your school has like an after school, before school literacy group, which some of them do, but a lot of them don't. It's actually not a bad way to do it, especially for kids who really need a lot of help because the content that they're doing in class might not be accessible for them anyway. Like, if you have a kid with more significant dyslexia or literacy difficulties and they can barely even read or spell single words, working on paragraph writing is probably going to be just too challenging at this point for them anyway. So, stepping out of class, learning the basics, and getting them caught up with that is often worth the time. On the other hand, for kids that have more mild problems, missing class can sometimes be detrimental because they don't actually need that much help with spelling or whatever it happens to be, and they really need to be in there to get the extra reps of the core class material. So it's very individual as to whether it's worth it for you. But yes, this is a really common way to do it. And really, your only other option is to have some sort of private company that you can go to after school hours so that everything fits, which is an option. Second question here is about MacLit. So MacLit, by the way, is just a really common private program that's run in schools. This kid, year 5, late diagnosis of dyslexia, feeling like he's really low in the program. And then there's two parts of the question here. Can they basically do more individualized work for a kid that's in a group program? Well, usually no. That's the benefit and the con of group programs, is that everyone's doing basically more or less the same thing. You can often put in some subtle adjustments for each student, but the core work is kind of meant to be the same. That's why they're all in the same group. So it's great because it's really efficient way of delivering the intervention to lots of kids, but it's not great because if your kid needs different work to what the group is doing, then they don't get it. So you might have to take a step up the ladder of intensity and get some individualized support so that it can actually be targeted at the right level, or stay in the group thing, but ask school if they can change his group so that he's in a different one of a different level of ability. The other question is, are there any other ways to get him assessed and then advise the learning support staff of his level? Absolutely. Presumably, the school actually has already done some kind of assessment that's placed him in this group to begin with, so they could reassess that. You can also get external private assessment, which is very detailed, and that can find the level that the kid is at and specifically what they need. The other thing to keep in mind, though, is just that kids often feel really self-conscious because they're doing kindy style work. I actually hear that exact quote pretty often from kids. They don't want to be doing little kids work or baby work anymore. But unfortunately, that's actually just where they're at. Like, they're actually really having a lot of trouble and they actually need to go right back to basics. They don't like it, which is fair enough, but that's where they're at. So sometimes it's a tricky discussion to have, but just sort of saying to the kid, like, look, stick with it. I promise it will get better. Keep at it. I know it feels like it's a bit easy right now, right? It feels like it's easy or it's for kids that are too young, but it's going to pay off. It'll get more complex soon. Don't worry, hang in. The next question is about spelling tests. A parent with questions about their dyslexic kid doing spelling tests. Let's just talk in general about spelling tests for dyslexic kids. As to whether your school does regular spelling tests, like at the end of every week, is very varied. Often schools are doing some kind of spelling test on a regular basis. Is it a bad thing? Not necessarily. If the spelling test is part of like a targeted program that's structured, so think like spelling mastery or something like that, or just a well-organized spelling program by the teacher, then It's actually great to get forced practice. I mean, kids don't like doing spelling tests, but it's a great chance that you have to spell, you have to practice, and I'm going to give you feedback. So that's actually really helpful. Kids with dyslexia and dysgraphia need that too. So on that side, it's not bad. It is a problem though when the spelling tests are disorganized or they're too hard or they contain random assortments of words because there's no real pattern to it. The kid is just getting grilled on all sorts of challenging words, and because they're not systematized with any patterns or particular order, there's nothing really that they can take away from it. Like a good spelling test, for example, might just involve all the words which are based around like one or two rules. So, for example, say it's like the long E sound with the double E or the EA, and all the words have got that in it. And therefore, your feedback actually helps you to learn, like, oh, yeah, I didn't use that rule properly. Whereas if they're just random words, like every word has a different rule in it, then you don't really take anything away. So, um, again, kind of depends. You sort of need to look at the spelling test that they're getting from school and see which camp it falls into. But by all means, if you're not liking it, the kid's not getting anything from it, or you just think that the level of distress is far too high for the return on investment, then definitely ask your school if they can change it or take the kid out of it. They might not want to, but that's a discussion you can have with the teacher at least. But schools do have the ability to make reasonable adjustments to kids' learning based on their difficulties. So they're definitely allowed to do that, especially when the kid is 8. Year 1 kid really struggling with reading and writing. They've got their GP referrals to the paediatrician, but it's a long wait and they don't really know what to do. They've also been to a tutoring center which has flagged potential dyslexia, which is not, unfortunately, really any more helpful than what you already knew. So this parent is in the same position that a lot of parents are in. They don't really know exactly how to go about getting a diagnosis, who can do it, what should be done, how long should it take, how much should it cost, and that sort of thing. The first thing to know is, should you go to your GP if you have this question? Absolutely. The GP is a great person to guide you on where to go next and also to give you referrals for Medicare and that sort of thing so you can get some sort of rebate, which you can get a rebate on dyslexia assessment, especially if you are seeing like a speech pathology clinic like ours, because there's Medicare plans that include speech pathology services. But you do not have to go to a GP to get that done. The next thing is, should you go to the pediatrician to get your dyslexia diagnosis? I'm going to say basically no, to be honest. Pediatricians can diagnose dyslexia, but I've never in my life seen one that's actually done a reading test. They either just get the reading test results from another clinician or they just diagnose it just point blank. They're like, hey, I've seen your kid for 10 minutes, once or twice. I'm diagnosing with dyslexia. That is a hazardous way to do it because there's lots of things that can look like dyslexia. I've got other videos on this, but basically don't want someone to just talk to you and your kid for 20 minutes and then diagnose them. You need to do actual comprehensive testing. So you can go to the ped. Technically, they can give you the diagnosis, but I wouldn't wait 9 months for it because you're just going to find out they want you to go and get a test done by a speechy or a psych or something like that. The whole thing with the tutor sensor giving possible dyslexia, this brings me to another point. Families should really be aware that there are dyslexia screeners and then there are actual diagnostic dyslexia tests. A screener just tells you if you are at risk of having that thing, but it cannot be used for diagnostic purposes. You can't get an actual proper diagnosis from it. That's the whole point of it being a screener. Screeners are good because they're really fast and they sort of let you know what you should look into further, but they're not that helpful if you want the actual answer. So if you've got a screener result or something else that's making you think the kid might have a learning disorder, you need to basically go to an allied health practice like a speech pathology practice or a psychologist, and they can do the actual diagnostic testing and give you the proper diagnosis from that. In terms of what to do next, if this person's already seeing a tutor for an hour a week, to help with the basics and they want to know what other steps you can take, I would say you're definitely already on the right track. I mean, getting some sort of structured intervention as soon as you can, as much as you can, that's fantastic. Start it as early as possible. An hour a week is fine as long as you are doing heaps of homework. Like you should be doing 10, 15, 20 minutes of homework basically every day, ideally at least 3 or 4 times a week if you want to make good progress. And the tutor or the program should include structured stuff for you to do at home. They should be teaching you how to do it so you know what to do so that it's productive. If you are finding that the tutoring isn't really working that well, you might need to go to something a little bit more robust or a little bit more evidence-based. And that's again where allied health clinics can come in because you know you're getting an actual evidence-based systematic phonics program or something like that, rather than potentially quite variable results from tutors. I mean, some tutors are doing gold standard evidence-based programs, fantastic. Others that we've seen families bring work in from are doing kind of just like random assortments of worksheets, which probably would work for a kid who's just a little bit behind, but not for someone who has an actual learning disorder. You need really targeted intensive intervention for kids with dyslexia and dysgraphia. So just make sure that the quality of the tutoring is good. If you don't know how to judge that, the easiest thing, A, is to either just see the progress. If the kid's making progress, that's great. If they're not, that's a red flag. And B, a more specific question you can ask is this a systematic phonics program? If they do not know how to answer that question, I would take that as a no, it's not. And if it is, then that's great. And if they say no, that it's not, then I would also take that as a red flag. Systematic phonics is the gold standard evidence-based way to teach kids to read and write, including whether they have dyslexia or dysgraphia. So it's got to be that. Otherwise, there's a very good chance that you are wasting your time. There are lots and lots and lots, like literally hundreds of systematic phonics programs out there. There's not one that you have to do. So don't get bogged down in that. The evidence is just around that type of program. That's the thing that you need. So just ask about that. Okay, this next question is about a kid in year 2 who's been diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD, just finalizing the report with the psychologists. What do we discuss with the school? So there's pretty much 2 ways to think about what to do when your kid has any kind of learning difficulty, really, dyslexia, dysgraphia, ADHD, intellectual impairment, language disorder, whatever. It doesn't really matter, but there's 2 things we need to consider. What is the school going to do? And what are you going to do? So the school has the ability to put in a range of learning supports, differentiated teaching practices, altered assessments, extra groups and classes potentially. Obviously, it depends on the school's actual individual resources. But those are all things that the school can do to either help the student learn more, show their knowledge a bit better, make the school experience a bit easier or more effective, etc. And then there's things that you as the family can do outside that, such as going and getting actual literacy treatment, going and getting medications, whatever it happens to be, depending on the condition. You can go to private providers or government providers through Queensland Health, etc., who might be able to help you with that. It's really important that you do both because the school stuff often just helps the kid learn what they need to learn at school. They're working around the difficulties. But the school intervention, very rarely, unless they have targeted literacy programs running or something like that, they can't really do a huge amount in terms of improving the dyslexia and dysgraphia underlying problems, just because it's so specific and so targeted, the type of intervention you need. So, yeah, definitely do a bit of what the school can do and also do your part outside of that. Okay, this last one is a really nice success story about a student who in year 3 said they may never learn to read and write, and now they're crushing it in English and hopefully choosing it as a year 12 subject. Timely reminder, do not underestimate the academic success that a dyslexic student can achieve. Yes, absolutely. If someone tells you that your child is never going to learn to read or write, do not believe them, especially if your child is really young, like in the first couple of years of school. If you go and get quality structured intervention and you stick with it for a long time, and it's guided by someone who knows what they're doing, you will make enormous progress. And yes, this did take many, 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 many years, but now in senior school, this student's doing really, really well. You absolutely can do that. Uh, we've seen dyslexic and dysgraphia students who go on to university and have success in the workforce and that sort of thing. So yeah, I love that this parent is putting this out there. Don't underestimate it, and also don't believe them if they say you can't make progress, because you absolutely can. But yeah, just like this parent, get onto it nice and early and start working hard. And just remember that, yes, if your kid does have a learning disorder like dyslexia or dysgraphia, you are going to need to stick at it for a long time. That is just the reality of it. This person's been at it for 9 years, but now it's going great. So keep that timeline in mind. It is going to be hard work, but parents will do a lot for their kids, and it's absolutely worth it. So well done to this family.